Hello and welcome. I am Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. The US State Department says that it is in touch with both India and Pakistan while urging them to work towards what it called a responsible solution. This comes as the two South Asian nations exchanged small arms fire across the border for the fourth night in a row. Canadian prosecutors charge a 30-year-old Vancouver man with murdering 11 people aged 5 to 65. This comes after the suspect plows an SUV through a Filipino festival crowd just one day before the federal election. North Korea confirms it is sending troops to Ukraine to fight for Russia for the first time. Pyongyang claims its soldiers helped Russian forces completely liberate the Kursk region on Kim Jong-un's orders. US President Donald Trump says that he thinks that his Ukrainian counterpart Zelensky is willing to give up Crimea to Russia as part of a peace deal. This comes despite Kyiv's previous rejections of any such proposal. Canada goes to the polls today, facing economic woes and Donald Trump at the forefront of voters' minds. Liberals and Conservatives clash over annexation threats and economic challenges. Gaza's defense agency says Israeli strikes killed 51 people in the past 24 hours. This comes as Israel intensifies bombardment after conflict resumes following a broken ceasefire in March. US airstrikes on Yemen's capital kill at least 8 people overnight, according to Houthi sources. The American military releases statements that confirms launching 800 strikes during its month-long campaign. Israel launches an airstrike on Beirut's southern suburbs after evacuating a building tied to Hezbollah. The attack comes despite a ceasefire agreement that ended intense fighting 5 months ago. World military expenditure reached $2.72 trillion in 2024, an increase of 9.4% from 2023, according to a leading conflict think tank. Europe and the Middle East see rapid military spending growth with heightened geopolitical tensions. India has officially protested the BBC's reporting on a recent terror attack in Jammu and Kashmir, calling out their use of the term militants and gunmen to describe the terrorists. The Indian government has expressed its strong objections to BBC India head Jackie Martin and has written a formal letter. India's Foreign Ministry of External Affairs will now closely monitor the BBC's content. The attack in Pahalgam, which claimed the lives of 26 people, including a foreign national, was attributed to the Resistance Front, a Pakistan-based terror group. However, Western outlets like the New York Times and the BBC have been criticised for downplaying the incident, referring it as a militant attack and not as terrorism. The US Foreign Affairs Committee has also condemned the New York Times for its coverage, accusing it of distorting the reality of terrorism in Kashmir. This controversy highlights the ongoing issue of how Western media reports on terrorism, with many accusing them of whitewashing such attacks. We are joined by a guest today to discuss this issue. Retired Brigadier Rajan Jamwal, defence expert located in Jammu and Kashmir. Thank you very much for joining us, Brigadier Jamwal. I want to just go through some of the terminology used by some media outlets, and I just want to get your immediate response, if that's okay. Obviously, we've spoken about the New York Times using the words gunman and militant to describe them. We've got the New York Times, Reuters, BBC, as we've discussed, CNN, all describing this attack as being conspired by militants. They haven't used the word terrorist. The only sources that have used the terrorists are domestic newspapers here in India. The Times of India and the Hindu have used that terminology. What's the importance of this terminology when covering something like this?
You see, the Western media and regretfully some of the media in India also, they have been on the, it's a known fact. They have been indulging in such anti-India stance for quite some time. Openly they are with the jihadis, trying to cover up their this thing, underplay. You have just seen the beginning. They're just calling terrorists as militants or gunmen. This thing. There'll be more to come. In coming times, they will say misguided youth. They'll go to much softer terms. So that the horrors of terrorism, they are not brought out as such. This is regrettable, but true. That's the world we are living in, and we know how to deal with such people. You haven't mentioned BBC. Even BBC is, by and large, doing these kind of things. So we have learned to take this in our stride. We know terror is terror. Terror has no boundaries. It has nothing. It is sheer terror. It is terror for the world. It is maybe directed against us today. Tomorrow it will be directed against US or any other Western country. We have had our movement is like October 7 was the movement for Israel. April 22 is the moment for us, and enough is enough. We are going all out. We are going all out. The nation has the resolve. The whole nation is behind the government. There we are going all out. It has to finish. It has to finish once and for all. And fortunately, the people are with us. Even the people of Kashmir are with us. You just see our district, the way people are coming out. The way people are coming out. A lot of people can't digest that.
Yes.
They can't just say. They are calling terror, terror. So what somebody sitting in New York says, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. That's my take on it.
Brigadier Jamwal, I just wanted to highlight the difference between the two words precisely. Obviously, you've got the word militant that's used the majority of the time in these Western media outlets, which is described as a person who is active in the struggle for a political or social cause, especially one who uses or advocates the use of force. That's the word militant. And then we move over to terrorism, which some dictionaries have a trouble describing the specific definition. But terrorism is defined as the unlawful use of violence and intimidation, especially against civilians in the use of political aims. Emphasizing that that definition, civilians, which is what we saw in this attack. Is that correct?
Absolutely. The difference is very clear. You see the behavior of these terrorists versus the Baluch Liberation Army. They are hitting targets, but they are hitting Pakistan Army. Are there any civilian casualties? Now that is something we can call, militant or whatever we can call. They are not attacking any innocent civilians. Even in the train hijacking, the people they kill, most of them are Pakistan military. Most of them, all of them were Pakistan military. So by no stretch of imagination, killing of 28 innocent civilians can be by, you can describe these people as gunmen or militants. They are terrorists through and through, by any definition. By any definition, they are terrorists and they need to be treated as terrorists. Not only by us, by the world, by the whole world, they need to be treated as terrorists.
Brigadier Jamwal, thank you very much for joining us. We now move on over to North America, where in a shocking incident, a deadly car ramming attack in Vancouver, Canada, has left 11 people dead and dozens more injured. The attack occurred during a Filipino street festival in the Sunset neighborhood, Fraser neighborhood. The suspect, 30-year-old Kai G. Adam Lowe, has been charged with 8 counts of second-degree murder. People say Lowe has a history of mental health issues and had previous interactions with authorities. No terrorist motive has been confirmed. Let's take a listen in to what the interim Chief Constable Steve Ray had to say.
The vehicle that struck festival goers approached the festival area from the west on East 43rd Avenue. It entered a small crowd enclosed area and drove through the crowd. There were hundreds of festival goers still on the street, and multiple people were struck by the vehicle. There are now 11 confirmed fatalities. We believe dozens more are injured, some seriously, and the number of dead could rise in the coming days or weeks. While I'm not prepared to speak about the potential motive, I can now say with confidence that the evidence in this case does not lead us to believe this was an act of terrorism. I can also tell you that the person we have in custody does have a significant history of interactions with police and healthcare professionals related to mental health. I am unable to publicly identify the person who is in custody because charges have not yet been. Last night, as members of Vancouver's Filipino community gathered for a celebration of community and culture in East Vancouver, their collective safety and security were stolen when a man in a vehicle drove through a festival crowd and struck dozens of people. 11 people have now died. Their ages range from 5 to 65. Dozens more are injured, some critically, and some have not yet been identified.
The attack unfolded on the eve of Canada's federal election, with leaders momentarily shifting focus from the campaign. Prime Minister Mark Carney expressed deep sorrow, stating that families had lost loved ones in a nightmare event. Carney later visited Vancouver, attending a vigil in honour of the victims. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre condemned the attack, calling it a senseless act of violence. Local officials are working alongside federal authorities as the investigation continues. Let's take a listen in to what the candidates had to say.
Tonight, families lost a sister, a brother, a mother, a father, a son, or a daughter. Those families are living every family's nightmare. And to them and to the many others who were injured, to the Filipino-Canadian community, and to everyone in the broader Lower Mainland, Vancouver, I would like to offer my deepest condolences and my wishes for strength and compassion in this tragic time. I know that I join all Canadians in mourning with you. I know that Canadians are united.
Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to be here today with you in solidarity after the terrible attacks that we witnessed in British Columbia. I know many of you are shocked, heartbroken, and saddened by this senseless act of violence and by the innocent and treasured lives that have been lost. And Anna and I just wanted you all to know that our hearts are with you today. All Canadians are united in solidarity with the Filipino community. All Canadians are united with you in mourning the loss of these treasured lives and in binding our country together to support the survival.
Canadians head to the polls today in a crucial election. At the start of the year, the Conservatives were widely expected to win by a landslide. However, Trump's tariffs and remarks about making Canada the 51st state have shifted the political landscape, sparking significant debate. The main talking point of today's election remains the economic anxiety triggered by Trump's tariffs. As Canadians head to the polls, concerns over trade and the impact of Trump's policies continue to dominate the political conversation. Carney wrapped up his 5-week campaign with a focus on international issues, particularly the strained relationship with the United States. He criticised US President Donald Trump for betraying Canada, stating that the rupture in the global economy caused by Trump's actions would forever change Canada's relationship with its southern neighbour. Carney described the current situation as a tragedy, but also a new reality that Canada must confront. Let's take a listen in to what Mark Carney had to say.
True that President Trump has betrayed Canada. He's betrayed Canada. and he has ruptured the global economy. Our old relationship with the United States is over, unfortunately. And America's leadership of the global economy is over. And this is a tragedy. This is still in play, but it is a tragedy. It is also our new reality. We have to.
Meanwhile, Poilievre, also campaigning on the final day, echoed Carney's sentiments about the US tariffs, emphasizing the need for Canada to take a firm stance against American economic pressure. Both leaders expressed their sorrow over the tragic events in Vancouver, though it remains uncertain if the tragedy will affect voters' decisions on election day. Let's take a listen in to what Poilievre had to say.
Toward production here in Canada. I've announced that as long as the tariffs are in place, Conservatives will axe the federal sales tax on Canadian-made automobiles. We will unlock construction of 4 massive Arctic icebreakers that will reassert our dominance in our waters and keep the Russians and the Chinese out of our territory.
Poll on Sunday showed a widening gap between the two parties, with the Liberals at 43% support compared to 38.9% for the Conservatives. The first results of the 2025 Canadian election are expected shortly after 7 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, when voting concludes in the 4 Atlantic provinces. It will be intriguing to see how the results unfold. We now move down under, where US President Donald Trump and Tesla CEO Elon Musk became hot topics in a televised debate between Australia's Labor and Liberal Party leaders. Opposition leader Peter Dutton was asked about his comparison to Musk and called the billionaire an evil genius. When asked if he distanced himself from Trump, Dutton stated, "I haven't sought to be anybody other than myself." Prime Minister Anthony Albanese also faced comparisons to Trump, with Dutton labelling him as Trump light. Albanese fired back, questioning Dutton's support for a proposed government agency like Musk's Department of Government Efficiency. Ahead of Saturday's election, Albanese warned that a Liberal-led government would bring chaos, but refrained from mentioning Trump. And Albanese leads in the polls, winning the recent debate with 50% of the studio vote. Australia's election will take place on May the 3rd as tensions between Trump's volatile diplomacy and tariffs continue to influence global politics. Let's take a listen in to what the two contenders had to say.
I think with people on 100% trust, but he has different views, different values.
Yes.
I support free and fair trade. He doesn't.
Can we trust Donald Trump to have our back on security?
Yes, and the US system, of course, is very important. When I went to the United States for the official visit, I met with over 100 Congress people and senators across Democrat, Republican. There's universal support for the relationship with Australia, and I think that gives us confidence is that it's in the United States' interest as well as in Australia's interest for that defence and security relationship.
There is a point.
We can trust whoever's in the Oval Office, Mark, and we respect the views of the American people. They've elected a president. I've been very fortunate to work closely with the Obama administration, with Trump, Mark I, with the Biden administration, and I have found, even though we might have political differences, the overwhelming sense, as the Prime Minister points out, from Republicans and Democrats on the Hill and the Senate, in the West Wing, regardless of administrations, there is a strong support for the...
Let's turn to Europe next, where talks aimed at ending Russia's war in Ukraine have entered what the United States is calling a critical week. US President Donald Trump, who has launched a major diplomatic push since taking office in January, is pressuring both sides to reach a deal. Trump urged Russian President Vladimir Putin to stop shooting and signed a deal to end the fighting, warning that without quick progress, the US could walk away from mediation efforts. Let's take a listen in to Trump's comment.
Well, I want him to stop shooting, sit down and sign a deal. And we have the confines of a deal, I believe. And I want him to sign it and be done with it. And and just go back to life.
Speaking after his meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at Pope Francis's funeral in Rome, Trump said he believes Zelensky is ready to give up Crimea as part of the peace settlement, despite Zelensky's repeated public denials. Let's take a listen in to Trump's comment once again.
Is Zelensky ready to give up Crimea, do you think, Mr. President? Oh, I think so, yeah. Look, Crimea was 12 years ago.
Trump described his meeting with Zelensky as going well, but expressed disappointment that Russia continued attacks on Ukraine shortly after their Vatican talks. This comes as over the weekend, Russian missile and drone strikes killed 4 people and wounded more than a dozen across eastern Ukraine. This is what Trump said about his meeting with Zelensky.
Your meeting with Vladimir Zelensky, and how did that meeting go? I think the meeting went well. We'll see what happens over the next few days. We'll probably learn a lot. I was very disappointed that missiles were flying by Russia, but that missiles were flying. Very disappointing. We'll see.
Staying in the region in a significant development, North Korea has confirmed for the first time that it has deployed troops to fight alongside Russian forces in Ukraine. The deployment, ordered by North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, is part of the ongoing strategic partnership between North Korea and Russia. North Korea claims to have played a role in reclaiming control of the Kursk region, which had been occupied by Ukrainian forces. However, Ukraine denies Russia's assertion of a retreat, saying that its troops remain active in parts of the Russian territory. South Korea has strongly condemned North Korea's involvement, calling it an inhumane and immoral act, and accusing the regime of sending its young soldiers to fight in support of Russia's war. Let's take a listen in to what the South Korean Defense Ministry spokesperson and Reunification Ministry spokesperson had to say.
이 우크라이나 전쟁에 가담한 것은 유엔 헌장과 안보리 결의를 위반한 명백한 불법적 행위입니다. 이를 공식 인정했다는 것도 스스로 범죄 행위를 자인한 것입니다. 이에 우리 군은 국제사회와 함께 비인도적이고 불법적인 행위를
북한의 젊은이들을 정권 안위를 위해 무참히 희생시킨 반인권적이고 비윤리적인 행위라는 진실은 결코 가릴 수 없습니다. 정부는 북한군의 즉각적인 철수를 촉구하며 현재와 같은 북한과 러시아와의 군사적 야합이 지속될 경우 이를 좌시하지 않고 국제사회와 함께 단호하게.
We now move over to the Indo-Pacific, where China is downplaying the impact of US tariffs on its economic recovery. Despite the ongoing trade war, China is targeting a 5% growth rate, according to Zhao Senxing of the NDRC. However, major institutions like the IMF and top investment banks have lowered their growth forecasts due to the tariffs. Policymakers in Beijing are focusing on additional fiscal and monetary stimulus to offset the trade war's effects. The tensions between China and the United States continue to shake markets, raising fears of a recession. President Trump's tariff actions have disrupted supply chains and industries across the globe. Meanwhile, US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent contradicted Trump's statement about ongoing tariffs talks with China. He said he was unaware of any discussions between Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. The uncertainty surrounding the trade war continues, but both nations are exploring options to de-escalate tensions. We now turn to the Middle East, where at least 51 people were killed in a deadly airstrike in Gaza, according to the territory's civil defense agency. The strikes carried out by Israeli forces targeted multiple areas, including a group of civilians in eastern Gaza City, a home in Khan Yunis, and a cafe near the Berej refugee camp. Meanwhile, Israel continued its military campaign on March the 18th, following the collapse of a 2-month ceasefire with Hamas. The Gaza Health Ministry, run by Hamas, now reports the overall death toll since the war began has risen to more than 52,200 people, with hundreds of previously missing people now confirmed dead. The war began with the Hamas-led attack on Israel on October the 7th, 2023, which killed over 1,200 people and led to the abduction of 251 hostages. Israel says its renewed offensive is aimed at securing the release of the 58 remaining captives, 34 of whom are believed to be dead. We are now joined by Professor Rohan Gunaratne, Middle East Affairs expert located in Singapore, to discuss this further once again. Thank you very much, Rohan, for joining us as always. How do you assess these latest strikes on the Gaza Strip? 52 people reported by Gaza to be killed in a single day.
Thomas Potier, what we are seeing is that IDF is very keen to dismantle Hamas, but Hamas elements always seek refuge. They hide among civilians, whether it is in churches, mosques, or schools, or other hospitals. So that is why there are civilian fatalities. Israel has very clearly informed during the negotiations, and there's a new round of negotiations right now going on, mediated by Egypt and Qatar, that Hamas should surrender. Disarmament is essential in addition to releasing the hostages. But Hamas has disagreed to disarm. So that is the current situation.
Professor Gunaratne, I just want you to analyse Israel's strategy. Obviously, during the 2-month ceasefire, we saw the release of a number of hostages. Since Israel's resumed attacks on the Gaza Strip, we have seen the release of none. How do you analyse Israel's strategy in their hostage releasing methods?
Israel is not able to secure the release of their hostages by conducting military operations, because Hamas has very carefully hidden the hostages so that it will be nearly impossible for Israel to seek their release. So I believe that Israel will eventually enter a new phase of negotiations. But at the same time, Israel is determined to ask Hamas to disarm. Certainly the negotiators have agreed for Hamas not to have a role in governance, but Hamas is not agreeable to disarmament, and that is why Israel is continuing these operations. Israel's objective is to dismantle Hamas and remove their military capability, their militant capabilities.
Yes. Rohan Gunaratne, thank you very much for joining us as always. We stay in the region now, where at least 8 people were killed in US strikes on Yemen's capital of Sana'a, including women and children, according to the rebel Houthi media. The strikes targeted the Thaqban area in northern Sana'a, with additional attacks reported in the Houthis' northern stronghold of Sada and Amran provinces. Houthis also claimed another missile launch towards Israel on Sunday. Israel's military says it intercepted the missile before it reached its territory. These latest bombings raised the death toll from US strikes in Yemen to 228 since mid-March, based on Houthi reports. The US military says it has hit over 800 targets under Operation Rough Rider, killing hundreds of Houthi fighters and leaders in an effort to curb missile and drone attacks on international shipping and on Israel. Meanwhile, the Houthis, aligned with Iran, say their attacks are in solidarity with the Palestinians in Gaza. Their actions have disrupted traffic through the Suez Canal, a vital global trade route, forcing ships into longer, costlier routes around Africa. Now we are joined by Rubinder Sachdev, International Affairs expert, to discuss this further once again. Rubinder, thank you very much for joining us. This assault from the US has been going on for around a month now. Strikes happening pretty frequently. How would you assess the success of this operation by the US, Operation Rough Rider?
Thank you so much. I think one way to estimate would be by looking at what the US is claiming, right? As to what variations from that are, we don't know. But what the US is claiming is that in this last 6 weeks, it has degraded the ballistic missile capacity, or the number of ballistic missiles which the Houthis were shooting, by around 70%. So that means before March, whatever the number of missiles Houthis were shooting, now they're shooting only 30% of that, ballistic missiles. And with respect to the drones, the US Central Command claims that the drones are down by 55%. That is, the number of flights they've seen of the drones are now down to 45% from the period prior to the beginning of this Rough Rider. So, I mean, if you look at this logic, see, the US military goes often by a 80-20 rule. So, I mean, it would theoretically then look to degrade or reduce or bring it to a point that the ballistic missiles are down to 20% of what they were before when the operation started. And similarly, the drones are down to 20% from before the operation started. So that would indicate to me that this operation would continue for some more time till they've degraded some more. That's one scenario. The other is, of course, the Iranian situation in the background. But with respect to the Houthis, I expect the Americans to continue still more.
Rupinder Sachdev, thank you very much for joining us. We stay in the region once again, where Israel has launched an airstrike on southern Beirut in Lebanon. It's the third since a ceasefire was declared on November the 27th of last year. The strike targeted a building in the Hadath neighborhood that Israel claims was used by Hezbollah to store precision-guided missiles. A plume of smoke was seen rising over the area, and Lebanese TV aired footage of flames near the site. Meanwhile, Israel warned civilians to evacuate ahead of the strike, saying it would not allow Hezbollah to use Beirut's suburb as a safe haven. Prime Minister Netanyahu's office defended the action, calling it a necessary move to counter threats from the Iran-backed group. Meanwhile, Lebanese President Joseph Aoun condemned the strike as a violation of the ceasefire and called on the US and France to pressure Israel to stop its attacks. The United Nations also urged restraint, warning that further escalation could derail the truce. Meanwhile, a separate Israeli drone strike in southern Lebanon killed one person, reportedly a Hezbollah member. Let's turn to Iran now, where the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has ordered a thorough investigation into a devastating explosion at the Shahid Raja'i port near the strategic Strait of Hormuz, which killed at least 40 people and injured over 1,000. In a state-televised broadcast, the leader called for security and judicial officials to investigate the causes of the blast and determine if there was any negligence or intentional wrongdoing. All efforts must be made to uncover the truth, Khamenei said. In response to the disaster, all schools and offices in Bandar Abbas, the capital of Hormozgan province, were closed to allow emergency operations to continue. Residents were advised to stay indoors and wear protective masks due to smoke and air pollution from the fire. President Masoud Pezeshkian visited the scene to assess the damage and express support for the first responders. He also said that he will support all government and will extend support to the affected families. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has reiterated his call on Sunday for a full dismantling of Iran's nuclear infrastructure as Washington and Tehran continue indirect negotiations. The US and Iran, mediated by Gulf state Oman, have held 3 rounds of talks focused on reaching a nuclear deal that will prevent Tehran from acquiring a nuclear weapon, while also lifting crippling US economic sanctions. Netanyahu stated that the only good deal would be one that removes all of Iran's nuclear infrastructure, echoing the 2003 agreement Libya made with the West, where the country abandoned its nuclear, chemical, biological and missile programs. Netanyahu has long vowed to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons, a stance that remains a cornerstone of Israel's security policy. As the talks progress, Israeli officials have not yet ruled out military action to disrupt Iran's nuclear capabilities. Despite US President Donald Trump's indication that the US is currently unwilling to support such an operation, Israel continues to consider military operations in the oncoming months, according to reports from Reuters on April the 19th. The ongoing diplomatic talks aim to ensure that Tehran can still develop peaceful nuclear energy, but Netanyahu remains firm, insisting that any agreement should eliminate the potential for Iran to develop a nuclear weapon. Let's take a listen in to what Prime Minister Netanyahu said.
You have to dismantle their nuclear infrastructure. And that means not that they will not enrich uranium, but that they will not have the capacity to enrich uranium, which means you destroy the centrifuges, you remove, of course, the nuclear material that is already enriched, and there are a few other things that you have to do, but that's the crux of it. The real deal that works is a deal which removes Iran's capacity to enrich uranium for nuclear weapons. Equally, I think we should bring in the ballistic missiles, the prevention of the development of ballistic missiles in.
Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world.